The South China Sea is one of the busiest bodies of water on Earth by any measure. Shipping volume, fishing activity, contested territorial claims, and military presence. It is also, by the assessment of every naval and air power analyst who has studied its strategic geography with professional attention, one of the most consequential bodies of water for the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. 6 nations claim portions of it. China claims almost all of it, a claim that a 2016 arbitral tribunal under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea dismissed in its entirety, and that China dismissed in return, having declined to participate in the proceedings and having declined to recognize the result. The South China Sea is where Chinese military power projection, American forward presence, and the competing legal frameworks of sovereignty and freedom of navigation collide most directly and most frequently. And it is where the United States Navy's maritime patrol aircraft, specifically the P-8A Poseidon, conduct some of the most strategically significant intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance operations in the American military's global collection portfolio. The P-8, a Poseidon, is a militarized Boeing 737, a wide-body aircraft carrying a crew of 9, equipped with a sensor suite that makes it among the most capable maritime surveillance platforms in the world. Its acoustic processing systems, its surface search radar, its electro-optical sensors, and its signals intelligence collection architecture allow it to characterize the underwater and surface environments across hundreds of square miles of ocean in a single sortie. When a P-8 flies over the South China Sea, it is building a picture of submarine positions, of surface vessel activity, of electronic emissions from installations on contested features, of the complete electromagnetic environment that China has constructed across the artificial islands it has created and militarized in the Spratly and Paracel archipelagos. That picture goes directly into the American intelligence architecture, and from there to every decision maker who needs to understand what China's military posture in the South China Sea looks like today, as opposed to last week or last month. China did not want that picture taken, had not wanted it taken for years, and had expressed that preference through a combination of diplomatic protests, legal assertions about the status of the airspace above what China claimed as its territorial waters, and increasingly, in the years since the People's Liberation Army Air Force had developed the operational confidence and the platform capabilities to make the tactic credible through the physical interception of American reconnaissance aircraft by fighter aircraft whose presence in the sky above the P-8 was intended to communicate that the cost of continuing the collection mission was climbing toward an upper limit that China was prepared to set unilaterally. The J-16, China's domestically produced twin-engine multi-role fighter based on the Soviet Su-30 design, but substantially upgraded in its avionics, weapons systems, and electronic warfare architecture, was the platform the PLAAF had deployed most frequently against American reconnaissance aircraft in the South China Sea in the preceding 2 years. It was fast enough to intercept any aircraft the United States was likely to operate in the region, capable enough to be a genuine threat if weapons were employed, and equipped with an electronic warfare suite that had been demonstrated in previous intercepts to include jamming and disruption capabilities that affected the P-8's own sensor systems at close range. The J-16 was not a patrol aircraft. It was a fighter, and its presence alongside a P-8 at close range was a physical demonstration of the combat potential that China was choosing not to employ. A demonstration whose message was clear to every crew member on the American aircraft. It was a Wednesday. The time was 9:17 local. The South China Sea, approximately 240 nautical miles southwest of the Philippine island of Palawan, was running under a broken layer of cumulus clouds at 12,000 feet, the sea surface below visible in the gaps as the deep blue of the central South China Sea in the morning before the afternoon convection builds. The P-8A was at 22,000 feet on a programmed collection route, course 240, speed 340 knots. A surveillance track that took it across the acoustic environment above the deep water basin where Chinese submarine activity had been assessed at elevated levels for the past 3 weeks. The crew of 9 was working, the acoustic processors running, the surface search radar in its collection configuration, the signals intelligence suite active, the electro-optical sensors building their picture of the features visible from altitude to the southwest. The P-8's electronic support measures suite detected the radar emissions at 0914, 3 minutes before the visual contact that would confirm what the ESM was already telling the crew. The emissions were consistent with the J-16's AESA fire control radar in its air-to-air search mode, bearing from the northwest, range and speed, indicating a fast mover descending through altitude toward the P-8's operating height. The ESM operator's report to the aircraft commander was precise. Aircraft Commander ESM J-16 fire control emissions, bearing 315, closing. Assess 2 contacts, formation, inbound. 2 contacts, a 2-ship formation of J-16S, descending from altitude, closing on the P-8S position from the northwest, from the direction of the Paracel Islands, where China maintained an airfield capable of operating PLAAF fighters and from which intercepts of American reconnaissance aircraft had been launched on multiple previous occasions. The aircraft commander keyed her radio. 7th Fleet, Ranger 7, J-16 intercept, 2 contacts, bearing 315, closing. We are on planned collection route, course 240, level at flight level 220, maintaining course and speed. Advise, the response from 7th Fleet came within 90 seconds. Continue the mission, maintain course and speed, document all interactions, transmit continuous position and status updates. The mission was authorized at the level that made this decision. The commander, 7th Fleet, who had the authority to sustain or redirect the collection operation based on the developing threat picture, and who had decided, as the preceding aircraft commanders on this collection route had decided before him, that the mission's intelligence value warranted accepting the discomfort of the intercept. At 9:17, the 2 J-16S were visible to the naked eye. They came from the northwest at high speed, descending through the P-8's altitude in a profile that placed them ahead of the aircraft and then turning to fall in alongside. A classic intercept geometry designed to establish a parallel track at close lateral separation, rather than an overtaking run that might be misread as an attack approach. The lead J-16 took a position approximately 40 feet off the P-8's left wing. 40 feet. at 22,000 feet above the South China Sea at 340 knots indicated airspeed. 40 feet was close enough to see the pilot's helmet visor, close enough to read the tactical markings on the J-16's fuselage, and close enough that any lateral drift from either aircraft would create a collision geometry that would give no one any time to react. The P-8's aircraft commander was flying a large maritime patrol aircraft with a crew of 9. The J-16 pilot, alongside her, was flying a single-seat combat aircraft whose entire design envelope was oriented toward speed, maneuverability, and weapons employment. The asymmetry in those designs was part of the message being delivered. Log position, time, identity of the intercept, the aircraft commander said. The crew was already doing it. The ESM suite capturing the J-16's emissions, the electro-optical cameras on the P-8's fuselage recording the J-16's visual details from the moment it established its position on the wing, the data link transmitting the P-8's position and status continuously to 7th Fleet. Silence is a signal. Neither J-16 pilot transmitted on any radio frequency. The intercept was conducted in complete radio silence. No guard frequency transmission, no Chinese language warning, no English language instruction. The proximity was the message. The message required no words. At sea, distance is language, and 40 feet of South China Sea sky between a J-16 and a P-8 was a sentence that had been composed carefully, practiced in previous intercepts, and delivered on this Wednesday morning with the precision that suggested it had been rehearsed. At 9:22, the lead J-16 pilot executed a maneuver. He reduced his throttle slightly, allowing his aircraft to slide aft along the P-8's fuselage, moving from the left wing position to a position approximately 30 feet directly below and slightly behind the P-8's main landing gear bay. From this position, his aircraft was invisible to the P-8's crew through any of the aircraft's windows. The electro-optical cameras captured his position. The crew felt his jet wash as his engines passed below the airframe. A physical sensation transmitted through the P-8 structure, not violent, but unmistakable. The second J-16 had taken a position on the P-8's right wing at a lateral separation of approximately 60 feet. The P-8 was boxed, a fighter on each side, the lead fighter sliding beneath the fuselage. The geometry was deliberate. The aircraft commander's voice on the internal circuit was level. All stations, aircraft commander. We have 2 J-16S in intercept position, one on our right wing, one below. Maintain positions. All sensors running. Transmit continuous update to 7th Fleet. She keyed the guard frequency at 0924. Unknown Chinese military aircraft in close proximity to United States Navy Ranger 7. This is the aircraft commander. You are operating at unsafe distance from this aircraft in international airspace. Your proximity creates a risk of collision that endangers both crews. You are requested to maintain a safe separation distance in accordance with international aviation safety standards. This transmission is being recorded and reported to United States Indo-Pacific Command. No response from either J-16. At 9:26, the lead J-16 executed a second maneuver. From his position below the P-8's fuselage, he increased thrust and climbed back to the left wing position. but this time at a lateral separation of approximately 25 feet, closer than the original 40-foot position. And as he established the new position, he made a control input that banked his aircraft slightly toward the P-8. Not an aggressive bank, not a maneuvering bank, but a visible, documentable bank in the direction of the American aircraft that required the P-8's aircraft commander to make a conscious decision about whether she would hold her course or react. She held her course. The geometry tightens. 25 feet. The J-16's right wingtip pointed at the P-8's left fuselage in a bank that the electro-optical cameras were recording frame by frame. At 9:27, the aircraft commander keyed the guard frequency again. Chinese aircraft, your current maneuver constitutes an unsafe and unprofessional aerial intercept. You are creating a collision hazard in international airspace. This maneuver is being documented under International Civil Aviation Organization safety protocols and will be reported to the International Civil Aviation Organization as an unsafe intercept. Desist immediately. ICAO. The invocation was precise and intentional, the same legal precision that the destroyer captains used when they sighted coal regs on Channel 16. By naming the specific international organization and the specific reporting protocol, the aircraft commander was placing the J-16's maneuver in a documented legal framework that China's aviation authorities and their diplomatic counterparts would be required to respond to in an international forum. The J-16 pilot's bank was now on the record as an ICAO reportable unsafe intercept, regardless of what happened next. At 9:28, the lead J-16 leveled his wings. The bank was withdrawn. The lateral separation stabilized at approximately 30 feet. The second J-16 on the right wing had not maneuvered aggressively. It maintained its 60-foot separation throughout, its pilot watching the interaction between the lead aircraft and the P-8 without contributing to the immediate pressure. At 9:31, the P-8's ESM suite registered a new development. The lead J-16's radar had shifted from its air-to-air search mode to a targeting mode, a lock that the ESM suite classified with high confidence as a missile guidance system in its pre-launch acquisition phase. Not a weapons release, not a trigger pulled, but the electronic state that preceded a weapons release if the pilot chose to complete the sequence. The ESM operator reported it immediately. Aircraft Commander ESM, lead J-16 fire control radar, targeting mode, lock established. The aircraft commander's transmission to 7th Fleet was immediate. Ranger 7, J-16 radar lock, targeting mode, request guidance. The response from 7th Fleet came in 40 seconds. Maintain course and speed. Do not maneuver. Continue to document. The decision not to maneuver was itself a statement. The deliberate, visible choice to continue flying the programmed collection route while a J-16 held a radar lock was the airborne equivalent of the destroyer captain who refused to alter course when the enemy geometry closed. Predictability is leverage. Professional restraint is not weakness, it is control. At 9:33, the J-16's targeting radar mode transitioned back to search mode. The lock was withdrawn. The ESM suite recorded the mode change with timestamp. At 9:34, a voice transmission came from the lead J-16 on the guard frequency. In Mandarin, then in English: American aircraft, you are in airspace above Chinese territorial waters. You are required to identify yourself and depart immediately. If you do not comply, we are authorized to take necessary measures. Necessary measures. The aircraft commander's response was transmitted on the guard frequency within 15 seconds. Chinese aircraft. This aircraft is operating in international airspace over international waters of the South China Sea in full compliance with international law. No Chinese territorial sea or airspace exists at this location under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. We will not comply with an unlawful instruction. We are continuing our lawful operation. All transmissions are being recorded. She did not change course. She did not change altitude. She did not change speed. The P-8 continued on course 240 at flight level 220 at 340 knots. At 9:41, the lead J-16 began to pull ahead of the P-8, moving forward from the wing position to a position ahead of and above the P-8's nose. The maneuver placed the fighter approximately a quarter mile ahead of the American aircraft, where his exhaust and his jet wake would be most physically present to the P-8's flight crew. He held that position for 3 minutes. 3 minutes of flying through the disturbed air that a J-16 at military power leaves behind it. The P-8 encountering wake turbulence that the crew could feel in the control surfaces and the airframe. 3 minutes. The aircraft commander held course throughout. At 9:44, the lead J-16 banked right and climbed away from the P-8's position, accelerating. Both J-16s transitioning from their intercept formation into a departure climb that took them northwest, back toward the Paracels, back toward whatever airfield they had launched from. The ESM suite tracked their emissions as they climbed, and the range opened. At 9:51, their radar emissions were below the detection threshold of the P-8's ESM system. The intercept was over. The aircraft commander transmitted to 7th Fleet at 09:52. Ranger 7, J-16, intercept complete. 2. J-16S maintained close formation from 0917 to 0944. Events include minimum lateral separation 25 feet, 1 instance of banking toward aircraft, radar targeting lock at 0931 for 112 seconds, verbal instruction to depart in Mandarin and English on guard frequency at 0934, wake turbulence maneuver 0941 through 0944. We did not deviate from our planned collection route at any point. Mission collection continuing. Full event documentation transmitting now. The P-8 continued on course 240. The sensors were still running. The acoustic processors were still listening. The signals intelligence suite was still collecting. The collection route had another 4 hours and 17 minutes before the programmed return to base. The crew continued their work. The aircraft commander composed the formal ICAO unsafe intercept report, while the crew around her maintained their stations. The report documented every event with timestamps. The initial intercept at 0917, the minimum separation of 25 feet, the banking maneuver and its duration, the radar targeting lock with its mode classification and duration, the verbal instruction and the specific language employed, the wake turbulence maneuver. It named the J-16S by their assessed tactical markings. It assessed the overall intercept as constituting an unsafe and unprofessional aerial engagement in international airspace in violation of ICAO standards and the obligations that China, as a member of the International Civil Aviation Order, had accepted when it joined that organization. The report would be filed through the appropriate channels. China's ICAO representatives would respond with a customary statement that the aircraft had been operating in violation of Chinese sovereignty claims and that the intercept had been conducted professionally and in accordance with Chinese law. The two positions would be placed in the record side by side as they had been placed in the record on every previous occasion when a similar intercept had been documented. The legal argument would not resolve the operational reality, but the legal argument, made precisely and consistently and in the appropriate international forum, was not nothing. It was the accumulation of the record, intercept by intercept, that established the pattern, documented the escalation, and provided the evidentiary foundation for every diplomatic, legal, and strategic response that the United States and its partners chose to make. What had occurred in the South China Sea on this Wednesday morning was a Chinese attempt to make the cost of American reconnaissance operations in the region sufficiently uncomfortable, physically, psychologically, and operationally, that the operations would either be modified or discontinued. The J-16 was the instrument, the 25-foot separation, the targeting lock, the banking maneuver, the verbal instruction. Each was a step on a ladder of pressure that China had been climbing rung by rung across the preceding years, each rung calibrated to add cost without crossing the threshold that would produce a response that China was not prepared to manage. The P-8 had answered each rung of that ladder with the same response. Course 240, flight level 220, 340 knots, sensors running. The answer would be the same on the next sortie and the sortie after that. Not because the crew was indifferent to the J-16 at 25 feet, but because the mission's value was real and the principle being demonstrated that international airspace over international waters is accessible to any aircraft with the right to be there, regardless of what China believes about the sovereignty of the waters below, was worth the discomfort of maintaining it. The South China Sea is not Chinese. The airspace above it is not Chinese. The P-8 that transits it collected its acoustic and electronic picture and returned the intelligence it gathered to the decision-makers who needed it, was operating in exactly the space that the international order makes available to it, and will continue to operate there with the professional calm of a crew that understands precisely what it is doing and precisely why.